Hey guys, so sadly, my son and I woke up with flu-like symptoms. So I won't be there today, but I'm going to record this video for you so that you can see half the problems of Final Review 3 and how to work them out. And then whatever time you have remaining, you can work on the other half. So looking at number 1, we are simplifying the square root of negative 32. And the quick reminder is that the square root of negative 32 is the same as square root of negative 1 times square root of 32. And if you're looking at what is the square root of negative 1, hopefully you're thinking that is I. That is also something that can go on your note card. The square root of negative 1 is equal to I. In addition, I squared is equal to negative 1. Then 32, you guys simplify how you would prefer to simplify the radical. I'll take out the perfect square, which is 16 goes into 32 evenly, and then that's I times 4 root 2, which simplifies to 4I square root 2. Number 2, looking at the square root of negative 2, again, that's the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 2, aka I root 2. Same here, this is the same thing, so that simplifies to I root 2. And as I multiply that out, that becomes I squared times the square root of 4. And then I squared, we just looked at, that's negative 1. Square root of 4 is 2. So negative 1 times 2 produces negative 2. All right, number 3, completely simplify the expression. This is a multiplication problem, and I need to FOIL. So I'll do 2 times 7, which would give me 14. Outside would give me negative 8I. Inside would give me 21I. And last, a positive times a negative is a negative. And then 3 times 4 gives me 12. I times I is I squared. And hopefully you're like, I squared. I know that I need to do something with that. You do. You need to replace it with negative 1. So we have negative 12 times negative 1, which will create a positive 12. So right now I have 14. These middle two guys I can combine. Negative 8 plus 21I would give me 13I. And then lastly, I can take 14 and 12 and combine those to 26. And so my answer is 26 plus 13I. Moving on down. And notice I'm not doing the B's because they're replicas, and that would be great for you guys to try on your own. Solve the following quadratic equation. Write any solutions that are imaginary in standard form. Oh, that means we'll most likely get imaginary. Okay, remember from yesterday, the quadratic formula, we reviewed it, but again, if you don't know it, I would put this on your note card. As long as you have the equation in this format equal to 0, then x equals the opposite of b, plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times ac all over 2 times a. So now let's identify a. There's nothing there. What is it? It's 1. So a is 1, b is negative 2, and c is 3. And then I pop these pieces in. X is equal to the opposite of b, plus or minus square root of b squared. So that's negative 2 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And then I start simplifying. Opposite of negative 2 is 2, plus or minus square root of 4 minus 12 all over 2. And then 4 minus 12 is actually negative 8. And then I have to say, whoa, the square root of a negative, even my son upstairs said something. Then I have to think, what is that? That's I, because that's the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 8. So that's I. And then square root of 8, hold up, wait a minute. I know that I can simplify that. That's root 4 times root 2, which is actually 2I root 2. So in simplifying this out, I'm losing so much space. I would have 2 plus or minus 2I root 2 all over 2. And then yes, you are right. We can simplify that because the denominator goes into both terms evenly. Remember, you can only reduce factors. So if I technically factored this out, it would be 2 times 1 plus or minus I root 2. And that's why we can reduce the 2's. So it becomes 1 plus or minus I root 2. And that is my answer. On to number 5, solve the quadratic equation for x. We reviewed how to factor this yesterday. A cubed minus b cubed. I know that that can be factored using this rule. A minus b times quantity a squared plus ab plus b squared. So all I have to do is identify A and B and pop it into that rule, which could go right on my note card. So the value of A would be X because that's what's being cubed here. And the value of B would be 2 because that's what's being cubed here. So I use my rule and I would have X minus 2 times quantity X squared plus 2X plus 2 squared, which is 4, is equal to 0. And now I set both factors equal to 0 and I solve. This one's so easy. I just add 2 to the other side and x is equal to 2. So beautiful. The other one, it's a little tougher. I'm not going to lie because it's not solvable by factoring. If I tried to factor, no go, it doesn't work. So what do I do? Oh, quadratic formula. So let's use it again. X equals the opposite of b. B would be 2 in this case. Negative 2 plus or minus square root of b squared, so that would be 2 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 4, all over 2 times the value of a. And I pop it in, and that would give me negative 2 plus or minus square root of 4 minus 4 times 4 would give me 16 all over 2. And then I simplify that out. So that's negative 2 plus or minus square root of negative 12 over 2. Negative 12, that looks familiar. That's the same as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 12. The square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 12, that's the same as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Or we haven't reviewed a factoring tree. You could actually also look at that as 2 times 2 times 3. And then remember, if you're simplifying via the factoring tree, you're looking for, in this case, 2 of the same before you bring it outside the radical. So this would actually be 2i root 3. And so this simplifies, well, that part simplifies to 2i root 3. And then I still have negative 2 plus or minus 2i root 3 over 2. Lastly, yes, 2 does go into each of those evenly. And so my answer is negative 1 plus or minus I root 3. And could we have solved that one by completing the square? Yeah, it might have even been easier, but we just reviewed using the quadratic formula. All right, moving on up, solve the radical equation. Now, this is the most current unit, so I'm hoping that this is the freshest in your mind. Solve the radical equation, or sorry, this is the unit we took the test over before we took that last quiz. Anyway, solve the radical equation, make sure to check for extraneous solutions. Substitute, if you could pause the video and have students try A on their own, and then replay the video and we can see if we've caught any mistakes. All right, if you're replaying the video, hopefully you should check that the first thing you did was added 5, which gave you negative 2. Then to get rid of that exponent, you should have raised to the reciprocal power, which would give you negative 8. That cancels. And then finally you add 1. And that gives you x is equal to negative 7. When I check it, negative 7 minus 1 is negative 8. The cubed root of negative 8 is negative 2. Negative 2 minus 5 is negative 7. Number 7, solve the inequality. We know how to do this. Let's get b by itself. So we subtract 14b, subtract 14b. And that gives me negative 16b minus 18 is less than or equal to 14. I add 18, and that gives me negative 16b is less than or equal to 32. Then I divide by negative. Yes, I said it weirdly because you have to think when you divide by a negative in an inequality, There's something we need to do with that symbol, and that is switch it around. So b should actually be greater than or equal to -2. And that's it. Number 8 is a compound inequality, meaning now we have to solve and analyze our solution that has to fit 2 situations. So what do we do first? Well, let's get x by itself so we can actually analyze the answers of x. Add 1, we get 3x is greater than -24. Divide both sides by 3, and that gives me x has to be greater than -8. Notice I didn't flip the sign because I didn't divide by a negative. And subtract 7, 2x has to be less than 12. Divide by 2, and we see that x has to be less than 6. Now it does say list your answers in interval notation. So what types of numbers are both less than 6 and bigger than -8? If you wanted a number line, you would have an open circle at 6 going up until -8 with another open circle. They didn't ask us for a number line, but we do have to use that potentially for putting our answers in interval notation. The smallest value x could be is -8. I have a parentheses because it's an open circle, and then they can go up to +6. And again, it's a parentheses because of the open circle. So that would be the answer for this one. Number 9, an absolute value equation. So we need to get absolute value by itself. So we'll add 2, and I have the absolute value of 3x minus 2 is equal to 9. Now, after you isolate the absolute value, you might be thinking, wait, absolute value has 2 situations, or you can think 2 distances away from 0 on the number line. This number, let's pretend it was just x that I highlighted, could be 9 because the absolute value of 9 is 9, or it could be -9 because the absolute value of -9 is still 9. So to solve, we actually have to have 2 equations. 3x minus 2 equals 9, and 3x minus 2 is equal to -9. And then I'll solve for both. So I have to add 2, giving me 3x is equal to -7, divide by 3, and I see that x has to equal -7/3. Add 2, and that gives me 3x equals 11, divide by 3, and x has to equal 11/3. So those are my 2 answers, and I'm going to choose those on the Scantron. Moving right along here, number 10, an absolute value inequality. Okay, here the absolute value is already by itself, but I do have to remember the absolute value is 2 distances away from 0 on a number line. And we looked at a memory word that you could write on your note card. If it's a less than symbol, that means our answers are going to match a compound inequality that would have the word and in the middle. And if it's a great or symbol, then your answers are going to match a compound inequality that has an or word in the middle. After you have your word set, then we're going to set up our 2 inequalities. The one on the right is exactly what you see without the absolute value. The one on the left, we take the 3x minus 2, but we're going to flip the inequality symbol and flip the sign of the number, because now we're dealing with the negative direction away from 0 on a number line. Now I solve for both. Add 2, and I get 3x is less than 7. So x has to be less than 7/3. And add 2, that gives us 3x has to be greater than -3. Divide by 3, and x has to be greater than -1. This is an and situation, so it has to meet both conditions. So our answers would look like parentheses, -1 to 7/3 with parentheses, because those numbers would make both of the inequalities true. Moving right along, number 11, make sure to know the names of all of these graphs. What type of graph is this one? This is a square root. If you want to see a visual, It's that situation. Technically, it would have different numbers because the graph was moved, but that's the situation that we have. This one is a parabola, which comes from a quadratic equation. Think about x squared. This, hopefully we all know this. This is a line, or you can say a linear equation. Key features are y equals just x. And then this one would be an absolute value. If you want to draw these on your note card and create the sketch, totally fine. All right, and now we have begun the last unit, which we learned last week. Find the slope of the line through the pair of points. Here's something I could put on my note card. Slope can be found by taking y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And now I have to actually put this in. So this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2, and I pop those in. So that would be 6 minus 7 over -3 minus -4. 6 minus 7 would create -1. A minus and negative does create a positive. So -3 plus 4 gives me +4, gives me just 1. And so that simplifies to -1. Write the equation of the following in point slope form. If you're like, what is that? It's y minus y1 equals m times parentheses x minus x1. That can go on your note card. So how do we use it? The points on your line represent x1, y1. So we would have y minus -2 is equal to my slope, 1/2, times quantity x minus 1. Minus a negative creates a positive, so we have y plus 2 equals 1/2. Quantity x minus 1. No idea what's going on upstairs. One of my kids is sick and 2 of my kids are not. It sounds like they're just having a heyday. Okay, so there is the answer, and let's move on to number 14. Label the x-intercept of the following as an ordered pair. How do I find the x-intercept? That's always where y equals 0. So what we're going to do to find any x-intercept is we're going to replace y with 0 and solve. So I would have 5x minus 6 times 0 is equal to 30. That creates just 5x equals 30. Divide by 5, and I would see that x is equal to 6. As an ordered pair, the x value is 6. What is going on? And the y value is 0. So my ordered pair is 6, 0. Number 15, find the distance. I know the distance formula. If not, it can go on my handy dandy note card. So it's the square root of y2 minus y1 squared plus quantity x2 minus x1 squared. So here is my x1, y1. Here is my x2, y2. And I'm going to pop that in. Square root of quantity 5 minus 3 squared plus quantity 3 minus -1 squared. And that gives me 2 squared plus a minus a negative creates a positive. So that'll create 4 squared. And that becomes 4 plus 16, which is the square root of 20. Most likely I will need to put it in simplest radical form. So the square root of 20 is the same as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, which is 2 root 5. Number 16, write the equation of a circle. If you're like, the circle, what is that one? It's quantity x minus h squared plus quantity y minus k squared is equal to r squared. And the key pieces to put in are h, k, and r. So looking at number 16, they gave you h and k. H and k represent your center, and they gave you r. R is 2. So we just got to pop those in. Quantity x minus 1 squared plus quantity y minus -3 squared is equal to 2 squared. And the last thing I can do is that minus a negative will create a nice positive. So I have plus quantity y plus 3 squared is equal to 4. All right, just a few more. Hang with me, we're almost there. Write the equation in slope-intercept form. What is slope-intercept form? That's y equals mx plus b. But important pieces to know, b has to be the y-intercept. So if you're given the y-intercept, you have to be given the point with x being 0. If you're not given that, you cannot start in this form. So looking at letter A, did they give me the y-intercept? No, x is not 0. So what can I do? Well, I can start in point slope form because they did give me a point. You don't remember it, we wrote it above, but it's y minus y1. So y minus, this is my x1, y1. Y minus -6 equals my slope, which is -1/3 times x minus x1, so x minus 3. Where do I go from here? Well, slope-intercept form has y by itself. So let's just isolate y. We have y plus 6 equals -1/3 quantity x minus 3. I distribute that 1/3, -1/3, and that's -1/3 x plus, if you think about multiplying this, you multiply the numerators, so that'll be 3 over 3, which is 1. And I still have y plus 6 over here. So lastly, I subtract 6, and there's my equation. Y equals -1/3 x minus 5. All right, guys, we got just 3 more, and you can finish the rest. Find the midpoint of the points. Midpoint, what is that? X1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So I go ahead and I pop these in x1, y1, x2, y2, and I'm going to find the average of the x's and the averages of the y's. So that would be 1 plus 3 divided by 2, and -2 plus 4 divided by 2. So that becomes 2. -2 plus 4 is 2 divided by 2 gives me 1. 2, 1. That's it. Number 19, graph the equations given. This one and B are in slope-intercept form. So as a quick reminder, when you have slope-intercept, you're going to start with the y-intercept. So the y-intercept, your b value is -2. Your slope is -1/2. So I would sketch a graph for myself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would go to -2. That's the y-intercept. And if the slope is -1/2, you could use it as -1/2, or you could use it as 1 over -2. We're going to go up 1, then we'd have to go to the left 2 to maintain a negative. Or if we went down 1, we'd have to go to right 2 to maintain a negative slope. And that would be my line. Guys, here we are at the end. Write the equation of the line. Why does OneNote do this? It's like, oh, you thought you were at the end? Now you need to scroll all the way down. Write the equation of the line in standard form. Standard form looks like ax plus by equals c, but a few stipulations on standard form. A has to be bigger than 0, and a, b, and c all have to be integers. What does that mean? Basically no fractions. So let's see how we would do this. First of all, every equation has a slope. So we have to start there. The slope is equal to, if I call this x1, y1, and x2, y2, it's going to be 10 minus 2 over 3 minus -1. 10 minus 2 is 8. When you minus the negative, becomes a positive, so that becomes 4. My slope is 2. Now where do I go? I can't use y-intercept because I don't have an x-coordinate of 0. So where do I go? Point slope form. Let's do it. So I would have y minus y1, which is 2, equals my slope, which is 2, times x minus x1, which is -1. I can simplify that. That's y minus 2 equals 2 times quantity x plus 1. Now, to get this in standard form, I need to really distribute and move the x to the left side with the y. So I'm going to distribute that. And I have y minus 2 equals 2x plus 2. I'm going to add this number. And that gives me y is equal to 2x plus 4. Subtract 2x, subtract 2x. And that gives me negative 2x plus y equals 4. Whew, almost done. OneNote, don't cut out on me now. What is the problem? This number has to be positive. So we can either divide both sides of the equation by -1 or multiply both sides of the equation by -1. And that will bring us to, cue the angel music, 2x minus y equals -4. And that's it. We're done. All right, guys, you can use the rest of the time to work on the rest of the packet. I'm going to put all the packets together if you wanted to just go back and review what we've been doing this week so you can come in prepared for the final. I will also be here during the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday time at 7 a.m. like was on your calendar. Other than that, have a great